Life on the railway was becoming difficult. The yards were packed with waiting trucks. High spirits were hard to come by, and the stations were crowded with passengers. It was hard working, and the engines began to feel the strain.
Despicable, began James. Those stupid trucks have been stuck in their brakes with me. I don't know how I can cope with that.
You think that's worse? Get stuck by a flock of sheep like I did today, grumbled Gordon.
What we need, suggested Henry, is another engine to help us.
Quite so, Henry,
said a familiar voice. It was the Fat Controller.
That's why I got in touch with British Railways. They said the only engine spare was a Class 40. Please do your best to make him welcome.
He tipped his hat and walked away. The engines groaned about another diesel coming to the island, but said nothing as they went back to work. Doug was the first to meet him, and was shocked. It was the same looking diesel who had arrived at the yards and got an inspector's bowler hat stuck in his air intake. He eyed the pannier suspiciously.
You haven't changed since we last met.
Neither have you, replied Doug.
At least you're still polished, he sneered.
I beg your pardon?
It's not your fault, but you steam engines are obsolete. We, on the other hand, are unique, powerful, and efficient. Soon your controller will be rid of you kettles and replaced with something much cleaner.
Doug puffed away, leaving the diesel smirking to himself. Later, he told the others on what the diesel had said.
Obsolete? Well, if I were there, I'd bump him to smithereens, with Scotland written all over it, said Donald.
What a cab! To think he would have learned some manners by now, snorted Henry.
I couldn't have put it better, my sen, agreed James. Enough, shouted Doug.
We've needed some help for a while. Now we've got it. If there was one thing that I have learned, is that we must make the best of a bad situation. That shut them up, and no more was said. Meanwhile, Bear was taking a maintenance train up the line, when he saw the diesel with a long goods train.
Oh, look, a high-mech class. I thought they stopped building riffraffs like you.
And I thought diesels of your clan would grow up. Call yourself an engine? You're a disgrace to us all. One day you will get your comeuppance.
The diesel seethed with anger as he rolled away, but I'm sorry to say, Bear was right. Later that day, the diesel was waiting at the platform with an express for Barrow, but to everyone's surprise, he didn't move. His driver climbed down to inspect. The fault wasn't hard to find.
Your engine's overheated, he said. What a way to do it. I'll go and phone for help.
Gordon had just returned from taking a line of trucks when the signalman came up.
That Class 40's failed. You'll have to take the express to Barrow. Quickly now, before more delays happen."
Gordon found him stuck and looking sulky.
"Efficient, are we?" he asked.
"Don't even speak to me," whispered the Diesel as Gordon reversed down.
"Serves you right for saying we are obsolete."
The Diesel said nothing as the guard blew the whistle and the cavalcade moved off to Barrow. That night, the Fat Controller spoke severely to him.
"It has come to my attention that you have said terrible things to my fleet. I cannot stand engines that are rude, troublesome, or impertinent to others. I make myself clear. Diesels are welcome, as long as they work as allies, not as rivals. You will be staying in the sheds until I can trust you to behave."
The Fat Controller turned and strolled away, leaving the Diesel with a lot to think about. The Diesel idled in the sheds, staring longingly outside. The Fat Controller had punished him because of his snobbish behaviour towards the engines.
"If you can't behave, I will send you back to the other railway. It's high time that you realise that you are disposable."
The large Diesel's grumbling sounds came to an abrupt halt, and his face went white as smoke as the stout gentleman left the yards. A few minutes later, Edward sidled with some trucks beside the sulking Diesel. "It's your own fault. We are all lucky to be here, and not to be fated to the cutter's torch. If I were you, I'd remember that." D261 sniffed and looked away. "Suit yourself, but heed my warning." Edward quietly left. Later, some workmen came up to D261.
"He's got enough fuel for the time being. He should be all right for this morning."
The engine raised an eyebrow.
"Go where exactly?" "We've been ordered by the signalman to take a goods barn for the works."
Goods trains were hardly D261's preferred type of work, but the thought of being away from the sheds coaxed him into getting ready quickly and purring away. The Diesel shuddered as he shunted his train into place behind him in the yards. Engines would tease him as they passed around him.
"Watch out for bowler hats, and make sure your engine doesn't fail along the way," chuckled Murdoch.
The Diesel gritted his teeth, but left without a word. D261 hummed along the line with his goods. It felt nice to be back at work. Bright green fields and dusty worn roads became a blur to him as he went. Soon he was flagged to a stop to let another train pass through. He stared about his surroundings, taking in all the new scenery. D261 was soon distracted, however, as he began to hear an oily purring noise approaching him. Diesel oiled up
and eyed the newcomer suspiciously. "So you're the engine that the others were talking about. Heard of me then, the green diesel salt?" "Oh yes, I've heard about your, incident. I wouldn't advise you to swank about like that here." "And who are you to tell what and what not to do?" "Someone who's learned from his mistakes," snapped the diesel shunter. "Don't misunderstand me. I loathe the steamies almost as much as you must. But we're all in the same boat now. And with that note, I should recommend that you think before you act. Pah!" D261 sidled away. After a short while the works came into view. Engines moved about the industrialized yards collecting trains and shunting wagons. The diesel had soon been shunted into a siding with his train. He felt disgruntled at the fact that he was left waiting again and wanted to be moving once more. Slowly, D261 felt something odd from beneath him. It felt like some kind of liquid lapping against his wheels. His suspicions were confirmed when he looked down to see oil dripping from his tank and onto the rails below. The diesel was about to complain when the shunter arrived.
"Right, D261, please move your train further down the siding and near to the buffers."
The engine considered informing the shunter of what he had noticed, but was eager to get the job over and done with and to be back moving properly. With a vicious roar, D261 spluttered into life and started moving backwards with his trucks. What he didn't realize was his bumpy movement was causing the diesel to leak even more. As he sidled backwards, picking up speed, D261 started to slip, but continued on. When he neared the buffers, the diesel's driver tried to apply the brakes, but nothing happened.
"Help!" he spluttered. "I can't stop!"
With a splintering crash, the back of the engine's train hit the buffers and ploughed into the ballast behind. The Fat Controller had soon arrived on the scene. By the time he had reached the accident, workmen were already clearing up the mess with the breakdown train. The diesel gulped meekly as the stout gentleman waved a clenched fist at him.
"You are a very disobedient engine, D261. I warned you about acting responsibly on this railway. If you'd informed the workmen about your oil leak, this incident would have been prevented. I'm sending you away, and you shall not be allowed to return to Sodor Metals until I can trust you to behave."
With a mop on his brow, the stern controller walked away. The next day, Edward arrived to move D261 back to the other railway. The kind old engine said nothing, but looked at him knowingly. "I'm sorry," said the diesel, staring at the floor. Edward was taken back. "Why?" he asked curiously. "For not listening to your advice. Perhaps I was wrong, and perhaps I still have more to learn. I was foolish, and now I'm being sent away again." "You are certainly headstrong, and too boastful for your own good," admitted Edward. "But I don't know. Why not view this as a lesson learned, and have taken something from experience? It's the only way one gets anywhere in life." The diesel considered. "Yes, you are right. Perhaps when I've learned a little more and become a bit more responsible, I could come back here." The old engine smiled. "I look forward to that day." As Edward and D261 departed, spirits were a little lifted. The diesel had disgraced himself and had some hard lessons to learn. But perhaps he'll become a better engine. I hope so. Don't you?